A comprehensive Resto Druid guide covering talents, rotation, itemization, min-maxing, bugs, and macros. Where applicable, each section will address Raid and Mythic Plus separately. A short TLDR will be provided at the beginning if possible. This will be a thorough but concise body of well-explained material intended for easy reference wherever needed. If you are entirely new to healing, druid, or struggling with rotations, I suggest a soon-to-be-released shorter Resto video. This guide is tailored for Midnight patch 12.0. Any balance changes made during the season will be noted in the pinned comment. If significant changes accumulate, a new video will be released, and this one will be marked as outdated. Last thing to note is that this is one of the two healers that I have extensive playtime with, meaning I do feel I have a comprehensive grasp on the mechanics. Personal recommendations and deviations from the established norms will be made. However, these will be marked as opinions and thoroughly demonstrated. Should you not appreciate these minor changes, the most popular meta will also be noted alongside my own suggestions. Firstly, raid talents. Renewing Surge versus Wild Synthesis. Your F-Flow and summons will amount for approximately 10% of total healing, meaning that this talent grants less than 3% total healing, which for a talent point is rather underwhelming. Swiftmend grants approximately 4% of total healing, so with a 20% average reduction, that is less than a 1% increase. However, casting Swiftmend more often means more hot extensions due to Verdant Infusion. It means more and better reduce regrowths from Soul of the Forest. It means summoning more trees, which increase overall healing by 5%. And. Swiftmend is now a central part of Druid. Triggering these buffs far outweighs a 2% heal increase. Next talents, improved Wild Growth and improved Swiftmend, versus improved Ironbark and regenerative Heartwood. This is not an inaccuracy, really. It mostly comes down to whether or not there is single target damage in the raid. In the current iteration, Rejuvenations can heal for up to 500,000 during the Ironbark timeframe, and can further be increased due to Mastery. If a boss has a big Tank Buster or Heal Absorb, consider switching talents here. Lastly, and very controversial, why do I pick improved regrowth? In Raid, the efficient way is to use the last 3-4 of your regrowths on targets already affected by it, due to Mastery Empowering. Considering that Abundance now only grants crit and mana reduction, this effectively extends your burn phase by up to 5 casts, at the cost of approximately 1 regrowth worth of mana. More will be explained in the Raid rotation section. Next, M+ talents. I'm tired of people saying, the thing that separates good healers from bad ones is damage. Yeah, I wish I could separate you from this game. Healer damage in keys is less than 5% of party. Picking a talent that increases your DPS by 10%, which is 0.5% of total party damage, is an absolute joke. Pick improved Roar to save 2 to 3 seconds between packs for a total of about 20 seconds per dungeon. This is the single best talent in the game. Then, pick either Matted Fur for a shield worth more than 10% of your health every 30 or so seconds, or utility, such as Typhoon, which comes in real handy in Midnight considering no healer interrupts and a lot of stuns being removed from the game. Forest Walk versus Ursine Vigor. So far, at high beta keys, there does seem to be less one-shot dangers compared to previous seasons. However, if that changes, do pick Ursine Vigor. Lastly, Flourish versus Inner Peace. I think these are close enough that you will perform better if you pick the one better suited to your playstyle. Raid rotation. TLDR. You cast at least 12 rejuvenations during ramps and regrowths during burns. You press Life Bloom, Wild Growth, and Swiftmend as often as you can. You make sure you Swiftmend a target with many hots or low on health. Trank and Convoke is to be pressed in the middle of your burn phase. Convoke is to be preceded by Nature's Swiftness and followed by a Swiftmend regrowth. Last 3 casts of regrowths should be on target with multiple hots to trigger Druid Mastery and Nature's Bounty. Example of a rotation. Life Bloom, 2 rejuvenations, Swiftmend, 10 rejuvenations, Wild Growth, Swiftmend, 7 rejuvenations. 3 regrowths, Boss damage starts now. Life Bloom, Swift Mend, 7 regrowths, Nature Swiftness, Convoke, Swift Mend, and 3 more regrowths. Let's dive into details. So we cast Rejuvenation during ramp phases when we take a little damage, and we do this for full HP targets as well due to Nurturing Dormancy. Then, while still holding 12 stocks of Abundance, we cast regrowths on targets without regrowth during burn phase, aka when we take damage. Now, this season, something is different. This little shit. This introduces a few more rules. 1. Regrowth is now a burn and ramp spell at the same time. Welcome to Druid, everyone! Nothing makes sense! Firstly, this means we want to start casting regrowths 2-3 seconds before the actual damage starts. 2. People think we should try to avoid repeated casts on the same target due to nature's bounty. This is partially true. Towards the end of the burn phase, however, this is actually false. Our mastery offers us a huge bonus. Therefore, boosting our regrowths by 60 or so % is in our favor, because this echoes through nature's bounty. Plus, if someone needs spot healing, we can't ignore it just to do big numbers. This part is added in case my raid leader watches this video. And 3, after rejuvenations drop to 11, we must cast regrowths on targets affected by all our HOTS, especially regrowth. Improved regrowth secures guaranteed critical hits, while 3-4 mastery stacks increases this healing by 200%. Even if overhealing, losing 100% of your regrowth, if you have 10 or so targets affected by nature's bounty, you gain 20% for each. Note that mastery does not apply again on the nature's bounty target. This stalls for 200%, and considering distributed healing, this is also far less likely to overheal. This covers our repeatable filler spells. Next, maintenance spells. Life Bloom, Wild Growth, and Swift Mend. Life Bloom in raids also has efflorescence attached to it and no harmonious blooming. Therefore, the target of this spell is not really relevant, just make sure it stays in the raid. HOTS can be safely reapplied at 30% duration. For raid Life Bloom, this is important to execute due to Apex Talents. Wild Growth does not really have a target, specific, or synergy. Just press it. It's good healing and goes where needed. Wild Growth and Life Bloom are to be maintained at all times outside of the burn phase. Remember, the first 3 or so regrowths are ramp. During the burn phase, regrowths and Swift Mend pump so much heal and synergize so well, they take priority over Wild Growths and Life Blooms. The only reason we can get away with replacing one of the first few casts of regrowth during burn is due to rampant growth, eventually adding the regrowth HOT back in, and due to mastery stacking, which will be explained later on. And lastly, Swift Mend. It cannot empower Wild Growth anymore, and if you've seen my previous guides, you already know that was a bad combo anyway. If you ask yourself to whether empower rejuves or regrowths, don't. You keep casting rejuves during ramp and regrowths during burns. Both Soul of the Forest and powers are pretty good. The target of the Swift Mend preferably should have as low HP as possible to trigger Renewing Surge. Also, due to Verdant Infusion, 2 rejuves should be present on the target as well, even a Life Bloom if you'd be so lucky. Next, cooldowns. Unlike previous seasons, Tranquility actually extends our burn phase due to the new Flourish, and Convoke casts necessary regrowths, rejuves, and trees, as well as possibly multiple 2 seconds hot extensions without the old animation. So, cooldowns are to be cast during the burn phase after a few regrowth casts. How many? It depends how long the burn phase is, unfortunately. Convoke can be cast 3 seconds before the burn phase ends, while Tranquility has a 10-second window due to Flourish being baked in. For Convoke, the macro is back, which is listed in the pinned comment, and the correct order is Nature's Swiftness into Convoke, into Swift Mend, into Regrowth. This is extremely important. Soul of the Forest and Nature's Swiftness has been nerfed specifically because of this. It no longer crits for 50 million HP, but hear this. Soul of the Forest gives 3 regrowths, 300%, with a 60% bonus, 480%, multiplied by Nature's Swiftness 95% bonus, 936%, with a guaranteed crit from Abundance and a higher crit of 275% from Intensity. It totals 2,574%. Then, with 10 or so other regrowths triggering Nature's Bounty for 20% each on a 200%, it is a total of 7,722% worth of regrowths. Without mastery stacking, without random regrowths from Convoke, without many other buffs. This is the bomb at the end of Druid burn phase. Normally, there is a problem here, due to the fact that Blizzard Abundance Tracker cannot count past 12. However, with improved regrowth, this combo can be cast with as few as 7 Abundance stacks. Also, the targeted heal will always overheal. Ensure this is cast on a target with as many hots as possible to maximize Nature's Bounty. Pre-hotting, aka placing some hots before boss pool and then drinking mana, is also somewhat simplified. There is the usual applying rejuvenation on all targets before the pool. If you have time, you could also stack reforestation up to 3. These stacks get lost once the boss is pulled. However, the Tree of Life does not get removed, so get to 4 right before the boss is pulled. Also, during actual Tree of Life, rejuves are far more empowered, but regrowths are more important. Cast what is needed as if you do not actually have Tree of Life, and try to line it up with Convoke. Last section here is mana. Cat Weaving is still the way to go, as it has no mana costs, generates more mana due to Convoke giving free combo points, and is slightly, although irrelevant, higher damage output. There are some issues with the player being classified as melee for some mechanics and having to constantly move, but this is still the best way to get mana. The Innervate lasts for 8 seconds and should contain your Wild Growth and as many rejuvenation casts as possible. Unfortunately, fitting Tranquility is no longer possible due to its timing during the burn phase. You could alter your rotation and cast no regrowths outside of the 12 Abundance window, or worst case scenario, drop Wild Growth casts to 0, as this spell is by far one of the biggest mana costs. But, better yet, change the Tree of Life talent. The rotation is nothing complicated. Press it at the start of a ramp phase and maintain the same rotation. M+ rotation. TLDR. During ramps, 2 rejuves on everyone and maybe a few regrowths. During burn phase, spam regrowths. Supply with Nature Swiftness or Swiftment when needed during both AoE and single target. In AoE, also do Wild Growth and Convoke, or Tranquility if needed. Example of a rotation. Life Bloom, 2 rejuves, Swiftment, 6 rejuves, 2 regrowths, Wild Growth, Swiftment, 3 regrowths, Convoke, 2 regrowths, Nature Swiftness, regrowth. Let's dive into details. The actual rotation is actually quite similar to the raid one. Ensure you have 2 rejuves on all targets and 2 to 3 regrowths on targets before the damage comes. And then spam regrowths. Targeting should not be as complicated either, as here we do not cast these spells unless there is a particular target taking damage. So you cast on that target. As for cooldowns, do not combine Convoke with Nature Swiftness and Swiftment in one go, as this can leave you quite vulnerable to further heal checks, and will probably overheal. Tranquility is a bigger cooldown, but it pretty much functions the same way. Quick note, in previous seasons, Trank was a panic button. You could cast it without much pre-hotting and it would be good enough to save your party. Nowadays, due to new mastery scaling, cast at least a Wild Growth or some random spells to generate hots. Since Swiftment and Wild Growth are considered smaller cooldowns, the only maintenance spells left are Life Bloom and Efflorescence. Remember, in M+, Efflo is not autocasted by Life Bloom, and they synergize rather well due to Verdancy and Apex talents. For Efflo, just make sure you have it down. Life Bloom, however, is slightly trickier. Older versions of Druid Mastery gave a far meager number and with diminishing returns. Now, with Harmonious Blessing, Life Bloom offers an insane triple healing bonus on the target. When there is a single target damage, this is to be moved on that target. To put into perspective, casting Life Bloom and 1 Regrowth for 2 GCDs is as much healing as casting 3 Regrowths for, well, 3 GCDs. And even though I am a druid, I know between 2 and 3, one number is bigger than the other. I'm just not sure which. Again, Convoke, Swiftment, and Nature's Swiftness. Do not combine any of these. In this clip, I have no regrowth running, no mastery to proc, no abundance stack. Combining Swiftment with Nature's Swiftness makes sense in Raid due to having 20 targets, some with Nature's Bounty. If you are caught by surprise and have 0 HOTS when big damage comes, then it might be worth it, otherwise do not. Now, damage rotation. Again, this is something to do in single target usually, and only when safe. The benefits do not even remotely outweigh the risks. Apply Rake on all targets and utilize Rip should the combat last more than the dots. Once the combat starts nearing the end, start casting Shred and Ferocious Bite on targets with Bloodseeker Vines as to proc the AoE if possible. If you read this carefully, you will understand that this rotation actually applies to both AoE and single target. Swipe is not an efficient spell, as a Rake procs Bloodseeker Vines, which in turn bursts for the same amount of AoE damage. This does significantly more single target and equal or more AoE. The next category, in my opinion, is far more important, especially consider the latest class depruning. Utility. The signature of the Druid class, which, outside of the Interrupt, remains intact from last season. Firstly, my favorite, Stampeding Roar. If you cast this to help your party move from one pack to the next, you can, at most, save 60% of 8 seconds, which is 4.8 seconds. But realistically, usually it is about 3 seconds most of the time. If you utilize this spell in such a manner 10 times, between 10 packs, that is a total of 30 seconds. There is no other spell in this game that saves this much time in a key. Please use it. Then there is CC, Vortex, Typhoon, Incapacitating Roar, as well as Rake Stun, if you open from stealth. Also, the best race for Druid is Night Elf, and in M+, it does kinda matter. Shadow Melt can be used as a dropout of combat to res or drink mana, a makeshift defensive to deny an enemy spell, or Shadow Melt into Prowl into Rake for a makeshift stun. The reworked Heart of the Wild is also an insane damage or defensive tool. 30% HP for 20 seconds, which persists while in human form, or a decently high damage boost is nothing to scoff at. Itemization. TLDR, haste equals mastery, more than item level, more than versatility, more than crit. Any trinkets, tier set pieces, enchants that give passive haste or mastery are pretty good. Let's go into details now. While not having reached best maxed gear, item level is the most important. Simply choose the bigger item as long as it does not have crit. After that, the wowhead stats are mostly accurate. Haste is slightly more relevant than mastery, but honestly they are rather close. Versatility is suboptimal, and crit, it has near zero value due to abundance mostly. Best trinkets seem to be Heart of the Wind from the new expansion dungeon, and Emerald Coach Whistle from the old Argatar Academy. Should you not find these trinkets, any who give secondary stats outside of crit are good replacements. Next, tier sets. There is always the question which 5th piece we do not equip, and like in every season for as long as I can remember, we do not equip the piece that gives crit. Also, note that our tier set is not incredibly strong, so lacking it is not the end of the world. As for crafted items, we do not know yet. However, building Resto Druid is quite easy, to be honest. Again, anything that gives you passive haste and or mastery is what we want. Min-maxing. Let's talk about the simpler things first. Our combat res is the only one in the game currently that revives a target at 100% HP by default. You should be the designated combat res person in a raid. Symbiotic relationship, a rather small heal boost, just keep it on the tank. Next, there is a mechanic where HOTS are safe to refresh if 30% of the duration remains, because they add the duration to the new cast, which is a neat quality of life thing. This also applies to empowered spells of the same spell ID. When a Swiftment Empowered Rejuvenation is placed on a regular one, it gets extended by that amount. Now, this was a far more relevant topic when Swiftment empowered by 250%, but still. This technique extends your empowered rejuvenation by 5.1 seconds, gaining 3 seconds worth of rejuvenation. It also means that suboptimal extensions are preferable to casting on empty targets. So, if you have a target with 2 rejuvenations at 7 seconds and one with nothing, it is better to cast it on the one with 7. This prolonged lifetime also allows for more Swiftment extension opportunities, further expanding the lifetime of the empowered rejuvenations. Normal rejuvenation refreshes are also preferable, but only below 30% duration, as one rejuvenation with 10 seconds duration is better than one with 7 and one with 3. The raid mana damage rotation is Rake, Shred, Rip. Note, additional combo points will be generated by Convoke even when casted for healing, and possibly from Heart of the Wild. If starting from 0 combo points, however, note that enough energy may not be available. Replace Shred with Swipe, as this is easier to cast due to its 13 yards range, as well as the lower cost. Next, let's talk the skipped subjects, itemization. So why is eye level less relevant than haste and mastery, and why are the latter somewhat equal? As I've explained in the previous guide, intelligence is additive, mastery is multiplicative, and haste is kind of exponential. Let me explain. If you have 1,000 int, adding another 100 is a 10% increase. However, while having 10,000 intelligence, adding another 100 is a 1% increase. Item level is much better at the start, partially also due to stamina helping survivability. Mastery is somewhat multiplicative. If 100 points of mastery means 10%, then it is 10%. Technically, this becomes additive after making the multiplication. So, if I have 1000 points of mastery for 100% healing increase, the 100 is still 10%. But adding 10% to 200%, 100 base plus 100% increase, is a 5% increase. And lastly, haste. Now, this is a very weird stat. At a first glance, it scales like mastery, with slightly worse translating points into percentages, but with partial double dipping. 10% haste gives you 10% more casts and 10% stronger HOTS. You would think this would result in at most a 21% increase if all heals are HOTS. But, oh boy. Haste is an example. You cast 14 rejuves, followed by 6 regrowths, after which you end the burn phase. 10% lower GCD would give you 2 more casts, which would be 2 more regrowths. Now, of the 8 regrowths, the first one healed for a meager 100%. The 7th one echoes 6 times due to Nature's Boon, or 20% multiplied by 6, 120% more healing. The 8th, I cast on an existing regrowth, triggering my passive one more time and adding a 60% more healing to it, and a 30% to all 7 echoes, totaling for a bonus of 280%. Therefore, I got 2 regrowths worth of healing with a 400% bonus, which otherwise I would not have gotten, due to rejuves expiring and closing my healing window, or an evoker pressing a back button and healing everyone to full. Haste has so many ramifications: faster ramping, better healing windows, rushing to a boss's healing check faster, maybe getting that one extra GCD before the ally dies. Quantifying all of these is not something I can do. Just note that the more haste you have, the better it gets, to the point that Resto Druids are willing to blow past any and all diminishing returns to get it. While on the subject, our mastery is triggered by a smaller pool of spells, but it is clearly stronger. This causes many annoying interactions. Firstly, it is preferable to stack rejuves 2 on a target rather than splitting them between targets. Secondly, counting your regrowths. If you have 8 targets with 2 rejuves each, and you assume you have 14 casts of regrowth in the burn phase, you start by doing the first 4 casts on targets without rejuves. As stated previously, your first regrowths are pretty much a ramp and provide little healing. They are there to add more regrowth buffs. The last 4 regrowths, however, echo through nature's bounty and are far more relevant, therefore should be placed on a target with existing buffs to benefit from the mastery. How do you know that you only have 14 casts of regrowth? Well, you don't know, because Blizzard's tracker can only count up to 12. Like, who are they? The witch from Cinderella? Oh yeah, after 12 it just doesn't matter anymore. It expired. Like, I know the buff caps at actual 12 stacks, but I would like to know how many fucking stacks I actually fucking have. Just give me the number. While on the subject of bad UI designs, the bug section. If any of these will be fixed in future patches, yeah, sure they will. I'll note it in the pinned comment. The most important thing right now is Q casting. Now, there's a thing in WoW where if you cast a spell in the last 0 point something seconds, the cast does not stop and the next spell gets queued. However, if the next spell is instant, it is cast before the first cast is finished. Somehow. This was fixed for Druids once Verdant Infusion came into the game. However, they seem to have forgotten about this fix. Currently, casting Regrowth followed by a queued casting of Swiftmend triggers Swiftmend and Soul of the Forest before finishing the Regrowth cast. This is an issue due to the combo Regrowth, Swiftmend, Nature Swiftness, Empowered Regrowth. The solution for this is a Swiftmend macro with a /CQS cancelled queued spell. Some people insist Swiftmend into Rejuvenation is also somewhat bugged, claiming sometimes only 2 empowered rejuvenations or 1 appear. This happens due to the small range of Soul of the Forest compared to something like Wild Growth, which we are used to. Ensure you target someone within the raid and party. This is not an actual bug. There's also a bug that has been here since forever. If you use Bear Form as a makeshift defensive, take damage, proc Survival Instincts, then go back to human form, your Frenzied Regeneration disappears. Lastly, there are reports of weird interactions with Tranquility having a reduced channel time due to haste. The issue being shorter channel times, it might bug out and not extend heals as much. However, I have not been able to replicate this bug. This is only mentioned because people are saying this. And for the final section, macros, all of which will be found in the pinned comment. The Convoke macros with Nature's Swiftness baked into it. Remember though, this is raid only. The Travel macros, which shapeshifts you into the fastest form available. This is useful as some areas allow mounting up while seemingly indoors. The aforementioned Swiftmend macro to avoid the regrowth bug. The Roar macro, which also casts the GCD free Prowl, allowing for faster movement. The Shred Prowl macro, which casts Shred in combat and Prowl outside of it, as Prowl cannot be cast during combat and vice versa. This helps save some buttons, as Druid already has plenty. In the same spirit, there is a macro for Mage Food and Warlock Cookies. The Life Bloom macro for casting it at the focus target. Note this will most likely require an additional macro for swapping or removing the focus, as the player might die or have to get out of the raid with a mechanic. And lastly, the Vortex and Efflorescence macros, allowing for mouse over placing, should you prefer this. Overall, Resto Druid should be a rather easy to pick up healer. However, the spell's synergy, feeding, and empowering each other means the skill ceiling is quite high. There's always room for improvement. The latest class deep runing hit Druid the least, and the new insane combos and reworks added feels like Resto will stay the best M+ healer this season as well. In Raid, the additional buffs mean that it will improve the spec from being unplayable to a solid choice. The entire video is more of an index of all information I have on Restoration Druid, a place to come back if you ever are unsure what is the correct rotation or talent. If you are more in the situation of, I went to a raid, I tried healing, I parsed low and felt like I could not track everything, what should my next steps be? Or what should I focus on to improve? There will be a more guide-oriented video later on, which hopefully should be recommended on the screen right now. If you have any further questions or spot some of the things that I may have missed, feel free to drop a comment or join the Discord. Just like the last time, I'll update the pinned comment whenever Blizzard or the meta shifts anything. As a preemptive move, what do the Apex talents change? Nothing. They are a nice heal increase, but do not change how we play. The add-ons do not work, the Blizzard functions do not work, the classes are bugged. Hell, even the tree inform does not work.